Hello and welcome to
Yes.
the Elephant TV. Our guest today is Mr. Simba Guled. Simba, welcome to the Elephant TV. Start by, telling us who you are, what you do, and then from there we can get on with our conversation.
I am currently the CEO of the Frontier Counties Development Council, the FCDC. The FCDC is a regional economic bloc that brings together as an umbrella 10 counties of northern Kenya. These counties are Turkana, West Pokot, Samburu, Marsabit, Isiolo, Mandera, Garissa, Wajir, Tana River, and Lamu. These are mainly the core ASAL counties with low rainfall usually, and normally around this time actually even much lower than the normal. So we are now facing a period of drought. So as FCDC, these are some of the work that we do to try and find ways of mitigating these issues of drought and many other challenges that we face in this region. So that is what I do in short.
Yeah. Now that you've mentioned about FCDC, do you mind speaking about some of the work? Right now, as you say, it's largely the ASAL region, and we are right in the middle of a cyclic drought whenever rain fails in the region. So as FCDC, what are some of the programs, projects, partners that you work with in terms of addressing some of the challenges, including the ongoing drought?
FCDC was formed in 2014, just at the beginning of the devolved system of governments, which came into effect in 2013. So the county governments that have formed the FCDC are part of the 47 counties that were established under the Constitution of Kenya, Chapter 11. So in 2014, the governors of these counties came together and decided to form this organization simply because they thought it will be much more easier to coordinate some of the challenges that they face, particularly those cross-cutting issues like security. Remember, around 2014, this northern part of Kenya had experienced a high upsurge of violence meted on this region by, for example, the what you call violent extremists. The terrorist groups Al-Shabaab had attacked the northeastern part of Kenya. But in the other parts of also the FCDC, particularly Marsabit, Isiolo, Tana River also, even Lamu, but also in West Pokot and Turkana, there was also a high rise in number of incidences of violence through cattle rustling or ethnic or inter-ethnic violence. So that was the precursor of the reasons why the FCDC was formed. The governors then at that time thought that it was essential to come together and look at this from a broader regional perspective, simply because if they had not intervened, it would have derailed devolution, which was at its infancy. And remember, this region being a region that has been underserved, if I put it politely, but an area that has been excluded from any meaningful development since independence, and even beyond that, even during colonial days, this region now we are referring to as the FCDC region had received very, very little in terms of investment, both from the colonial government, but also from the post-independence governments, successive governments. So devolution will have been the first effort by the government of Kenya to start doing some bit of investment through the devolved funds and the money that we receive via the shareable revenue. So when now the high incidence of insecurity happen, it affects therefore service delivery, and it affects many other issues of development. So because of that, the governors came together back in 2017, thinking now, can we join hands and look at some of these cross-cutting, issues like insecurity? But there are also other issues, like, for example, disease control. Remember, these are mainly pastoralist area, and pastoralists being people who are dependent on livestock. Whenever there is a spread of livestock diseases, these counties that are neighboring each other easily become victims of this spread of diseases. So it was very important for us to come together and find ways of controlling this kind of a disaster. But as you also just mentioned, what to do about issues that have to do with the drought. The drought, which has been a cyclic occurrence in the past, now has become more frequent due to climate change. More and more often, people now become victims of this drought. Previously, long time ago, Abdullahi, you can remember when you were young, that drought used to occur probably after a bit longer period of time. Sometimes it used to take a couple of years, 10 years, around 10 years or more. But now we have seen the situation has changed due to climate change, and the frequency has increased. For example, the last drought we had was just over 2 years ago, and now we have another one. And last year we had been some quite amount of rain. So it has become quite unstable for pastoralist communities to manage their livestock under these conditions. So these are some of the issues we deal with as FCDC in collaboration with our member counties. So what do we do about this kind of situation like the one what we have now? Just 2 weeks ago, because FCDC's main responsibility is not an implementing institution. We don't implement any program. We are more of an advocacy organization. We play the role of the interlocutor. We bring together partners, national government, county governments, to find a solution to what will be possible in view of the challenges that we face. So as an example, 2 weeks ago, we assembled together a large number of development partners and our friends and the national government just to discuss on the issue of the drought. And at that point, we had appealed to the president of Kenya to declare the current situation of drought as a national disaster. And unfortunately, he listened to our call and indeed declared this as a national disaster. And now we can see movements in terms of both from international organizations working in Kenya and even the national government. We are now seeing signs of response to the drought situation. Just recently, the National Treasury announced it's going to release 2 billion shillings as the first measure towards supporting the most vulnerable people by undertaking cash transfers. These are funds that are sent to the most vulnerable members of the community to cushion them against the challenges posed by drought on their livelihoods. But we are also in the process of trying to look at ways of looking at this from more drought preparedness approach through putting into place policies and legislation, both at county level, but also advocating even at national level to ensure that we are able to manage this kind of situation in future. As you know, that this has been so frequent and it's almost now predictable. But we must really get this as something of the past. It should not continue. It is not okay. It's not normal that we should accept to live in this time and age like we did a century ago. So Abdullahi, I think as FCDC, our work is cut out. We need to find a permanent solution. Just to give you an example of one of the efforts now we are putting into place, in Isiolo County and Garissa at the border, there's a town called Modogashi. So Modogashi has been facing perennially a shortage of water. It's one of the most water insecure, settlements. And now we have brought together several partners, including the Red Cross, the Water Trust Fund, national government, parastatal, and also other agencies, including the United Nations and the World Bank, to think of ways of making sure that the issue of water challenges for Modogashe will be a thing of the past. So we have already managed to secure some resources. The engineers are working on a design to find a solution to this challenge. And if we find a solution to this, and hopefully not so long in the future, we should be able to find a permanent solution to the water challenges of Modogashe. So we will roll out this kind of
Thank you, Simba. The other aspect I wanted to get your take on is that the FCDC bloc occupies 65% of the country and 12% of the national population. All these counties have in total, 15 governors, 84 MPs, 21 senators, 15 deputy governors, and 15 county assembly speakers, and 500 MCAs. How are you leveraging and translating this political power and trying to get what FCDC is doing, both at the county level, where a lot of good things happen, as well as at the national level?
And remember, as I said, FCDC is primarily an advocacy organization, and therefore you're right. We are the convener of both governors, but also of the pastoralist parliamentary group, and also the pastoralist leadership summit. So this is a caucus of all the leadership within this region. As you mentioned, there are quite a number, more than 100 members of parliament and senators combined, and 15 governors, and all those number of MCAs you mentioned. So this, we have been able to organize annual meetings to ensure that we bring them together and look for ways of addressing issues that affect our region. I'll give you a good example. When we had our last PLS meeting, or the Pastoralist Leadership Summit meeting in Garissa, we had resolutions that we have now started implementing. One of it is, for example, we made a declaration that each and every county government must adhere to what is referred to as the Maputo Declaration on funding for agriculture and livestock department to the minimum of 10% of counties' annual budget. So far, a number of the counties, including your own county of Marsabit, have fulfilled that objective, and many other counties also have come very close. So that's a success example of what FCDC can do. Another one is we have lobbied for the establishment of the Livestock Marketing Board. This legislative process is taking place at the National Assembly. It has not come to a complete conclusion, but it's at a very advanced stage. And once it succeeds, it will be able to make it easier for pastoralist communities to market their livestock and put some value addition to this livelihood. We have also put our inputs into the BBI process to ensure that we are not disadvantaged. Particularly, we had raised issues around the amendment of Article 203 that will have brought in, if it had gone through, the 1 shilling, 1 man, 1 vote approach to sharing revenue in Kenya. We were very much opposed to this arrangement, and we had really raised our voice in this, and it has been heard at all levels of government and anybody who was concerned. So FCDC has been at the forefront of doing all this, and our leaders have played a big role in ensuring that their voice is being heard. So we are not sitting back. We are taking our rightful place in this country to add our voice whenever there is an issue that is likely to affect our communities. So FCDC is very ready, willing to even do more to ensure that we are stronger together and raise the stakes. In Kenya, as you know, everything is a question of negotiations and bargaining. Some of the challenges we face now, which have been quite for us a big problem, is the issue around education. As we speak right now, Abdullahi, close to 1 million children are out of school in the northern parts of Kenya, either due to insecurity or issues raised by problems caused by the drought right now, or other factors like even the COVID pandemic. So many issues, a concoction of various problems has caused challenges to the school-going children. And this is an issue that we have really been grappling with. And as you know, particularly in the northeastern part of Kenya, that many teachers had moved out of that region due to the insecurity caused by Al-Shabaab. So the national government has been slow in responding to this. At the FCDC, we have been putting our level-based efforts to get this resolved by finding ways of bringing more teachers to the region. And even though we may not have succeeded very quickly, but we are seeing that there are possibilities coming. So these are some of the efforts we are putting in place. But generally, Abdullahi, the FCDC region is, as I said, an area that has been excluded for decades and decades. Our problems are not few. They are myriads and myriads of issues. For us to resolve each and every one of them will require massive interventions in form of what I will even think will be a Marshall Plan. Infrastructure, issues of water, issues of healthcare, issues of education, security, energy. So population, yeah, most of our youth, most of our population are youth, over 70%, people who are below the age of 35. This can be a blessing, but also it can also be a curse, depending on how we handle it. So we are facing a huge challenge, climate change issues, as you mentioned, the drought. So we have to look for ways of finding a solution to all this. I'm not saying other parts of the country don't have challenges, but we have more than, I think, our fair share of these challenges.
One of the aspects that now that you've mentioned about, lack of investment and as well as, marginalization that started with the colonial period, post-colonial period, and the time before devolution. Now devolution, one of the aspects that is coming out is the question around, is marginalization now in some of these counties, does it have a local flavor? It's one thing to oppose one man, one vote, 1 shilling, but how about the accountability of some of the money that goes to the counties? For instance, in Marsabit County, at least give or take, they receive 9 billion from the exchequer every year. So by next election, Marsabit would have received around 45 billion. If you add constituency development fund, if you add actors like yourself and multilateral actors that come into northern Kenya, that is a lot of money. How do you guys manage these, and what should the leadership at the county level, in your interaction, what do you think they should do to be able to say, continue giving us money while simultaneously ensuring that there is accountability? There is a question of equity. This is a money that we've been promised and it should come down because we need to catch up with the rest. But the money that we receive, not as charity, but as right, is also used very well.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. There's a big difference between where we are now and where we have been, let's say, a decade ago. A decade ago, the whole of this FCDC region was getting such a small amount of funds from the national government. You will not even believe. Some counties were getting less than 100 million shillings the whole year, and that included payment of salaries. So there's a big difference between now and then. Certainly, I agree with you on that. But then we also need to look at this in context. What happened is that after the promulgation of the constitution and the county governments came into place, what happened is that there was a huge surge of employments within the counties. Many of the counties started recruiting their own people or other people as well to fill in the gaps by, for example, skilled, people to fill. For example, I'll give you an example. Isiolo County, where I come from, before devolution, we only had about 2 doctors, at most 3. Today, Abdullah, we have 32 doctors and consultants and experts. You can see, and all this costs money. I will not say we don't need those doctors. We need them. Probably we might even need more. The doctors, therefore, are there. We have increased the number of people who have been employed in healthcare in general. They have almost doubled or even tripled. Other counties were also not left behind. They are having exactly the same situation. In all sectors, they have managed to recruit skilled workers to fill in the gaps because, frankly speaking, these workers were needed then, but they were, due to what you are now calling marginalization, they were not there. And another issue was many of the people, experts, never wanted to come to our region because they considered it a hardship area. They thought going to Marsabit is like you're going to die. It's the end of the world. So they didn't want to go and work in Marsabit. But now,
in fact, there is part of Marsabit. In fact, there is part of Marsabit where you're sent as a punishment.
Yes.
If you have disciplinary ground, you are sent there. The GOK cars comes only once a month to bring the salary.
Yes, it's big salary.
It's the Siberia
and to take away stuff.
Yes.
So that is what has happened in northern Kenya. So many of these skilled workers, sadly, even sometimes our own local, people preferred to go and work in more comfortable areas. So county government somehow mitigated on this and managed to hire one way or the other, either through incentives or for other reasons. People trickled back. There was a push back, or a pull in, efforts, and that has increased the number of bureaucrats within our counties, and of course that leads to costs. So, for example, out of the 9 billion or so that Marsabit County now gets, I can tell you over close to a half of that will go to payment of now remunerations for these people. A part of it will go on making sure that their work becomes easier by giving them, some overhead costs. So what is left over for development is probably in line with the national, directions benchmark, which is about 30% of the total budget. And when you look at 30% of 9 billion, that will come to below 3 billion shillings. And when you look at that in the context of Marsabit County, we might think that that's a lot of money, but the reality is that it still remains a drop in the ocean, considering the expansive nature of that county, over 77,000 square kilometers, and people spread all over. One misfortune that we have, Abdullah, and I don't know how we can correct, is that we have the tendency of putting people in these small settlements far apart.
Yes.
And serving these people is expensive.
Marsabit is twice the size of Rwanda.
Yes, I can agree. In fact, Marsabit alone, when you combine it with Turkana, they make up a quarter of Kenya. The Republic of Kenya. They are a quarter of the Republic of Kenya.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, so that's a big county, and the amount of money we are talking about, in as much as it may look in wholesome large sums of money, but in effect, when you spread it around, it is not so much. The other part, Abdullah, sometimes in this discussion and narrative that we tend to forget is, of course, counties now get 15% of the revenue, which sometimes even the disbursements are quite disappointing, I should say. But what happens now with the 85%? of the other sums of money that still is being held at the national level. A large part of that doesn't come to our region. We need to really commission a study to see what level of the 85% being held at the national level still trickles down to our area, because we have a right to that amount, to those funds. The other failure on the part of national government is the release of the equalization fund, which is a constitutional, requirement. But so far, those monies have not been expended to date. What has been spent has been very marginal. So once again, we are seeing the inability or the unwillingness on the part of the national government to execute its responsibilities with regards to fulfilling the constitutional mandate. So, and I think you're right. We need to have proper governance system in place to ensure that every and each cent brought to this region is well spent. And I cannot vouch and say that sometimes misappropriation doesn't happen. It does. In as much as it happens at the national government, this being now almost some kind of a national culture, you will most certainly expect it also to happen, even at the grassroots and at the devolved units. But this is something we need to really find ways of managing it and ensure that we are able to prudently use our resources for the benefit of our people. But just to conclude on this, I will say probably what we receive as share of revenue, in as much as it looks much, but it's still very small, considering the needs and the fact that we have been left behind development-wise for many, many decades. We need to catch up, and we need much more money than that. So our counties have to pull up their socks, find alternative means of own source revenue by attracting investors. But then again, these investors will require some form of infrastructure, which counties alone cannot achieve. So we have quite, our menu is quite large.
Thank you. The final question, I know it's getting a little bit late. The final question is, we're going into the next election. A lot of the time, just like any other aspect, these communities or these regions are seen as non-important. To what extent that is shifting because of the shifting national politics, where certain candidates now priding themselves to be the pastoralist candidate at the national level, at least. And how can that be done in a way that the pastoralist communities benefit? It's not enough for pastoralist communities always to be thought of as an afterthought. Let's divide everything and say, oh yeah, these guys can fill in here. So how can that be? How can the pastoral leadership, including the parliamentary pastoral parliamentary working group and all other coalitions and formations that come under or work with FCDC, can leverage their numbers? Every vote counts at this stage now.
Yeah. True. And absolutely, I agree with you. In Kenyan competitive politics, it's about coalitions, about working together. There is no one single region in Kenya that can assume leadership at the top without support from other regions. So coalition forming between regions has been a common practice in Kenya since our independence. And I also agree with you. Sometimes our region has not really come in together as one united, group like the other parts of this country to negotiate as a single bloc. That has not happened before. We have always been fragmented. There was an attempt back in 2015 during our previous leadership summit, the pastoralist leadership summit in Isiolo. We had proposed to come up with a pastoralist party of Kenya, PPK. But then, unfortunately, that was scuttled, partly also weakness from our end. Some of our leaders were not welcoming this. But then now we are seeing again at this time, just 1 year before the election, our leaders again are coming to group up. You have heard of the OPM movement, which has come together to chart the course for this part of the country. We have the other wing that is, working closely with the deputy president, that also thinks that we need to ally ourselves on that end. Then we have a third group now that has emerged a few days ago under the leadership of my chairman and the governor of Mandera, Ali Roba, who had formed a party called the UDM, United Democratic Movement, which he also thinks that we can rally behind. But I think in the end, whichever way you think, we must come together as a group. We can't survive in this competitive politics if we are divided, and we will have no weight as such. And I will just appeal maybe to our leaders to rethink. Sometimes they are carried away by personal differences, unfortunately. But I think if they could just set aside some of those personal issues and look at the common good, we might be able to leverage bigger stake in the government of Kenya. So I'm just hoping, and from the FCDC, silently we shall try and bring our people together. We as ourselves are a non-political institution, so we cannot come out strongly as an institution to advocate for any side of politics. But certainly the interest of our people is for us paramount, and we still have a duty to implore on our leaders to join hands and form a united front.
Thank you so much, Ndugu Simba. And that is it for today. And thank you once again.
For this and other Elephant conversations, follow The Elephant on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at The Elephant. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to The Elephant, also on our YouTube channel by clicking on the link below.